2020. This is a Prescott City Council voting meeting. And Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any announcements today?
I'm a little behind now.
Yeah, we're all right. No worries. We have an
Except that we just had a great study session with Dr. Woodward, so that's excellent.
Yes, we did. We have an invocation today by Pastor Scott Savage with Cornerstone Church, and then Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the privilege of living in Prescott, and we thank you for these leaders that have undertaken the responsibility and opportunity of leadership. We know in your word that it says that you hold leaders to a higher account, and so we just pray that you would guide them as they guide our city. In your scriptures, it tells us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your understanding, to acknowledge you in all of our ways, and you'll make straight our paths. So we pray that in this meeting today that you would guide us with wisdom and discernment, and that when clarity comes, we would follow you with courage and obedience. We pray that you'd continue to protect and watch over this beautiful town that we get to call home. And as we anticipate and face the challenges that the future brings, we pray that you would walk in those challenges with us and that we would know your presence. We pray that you'd be present in this meeting, that it would be guided by respect and honor, and we pray that your purpose would be accomplished today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in pledging allegiance to the great Republic of the United States of America.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. Let's call roll, please.
Mayor Mingarelli,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Orr, Councilman Blair,
Yes.
Councilman Good,
Here.
Councilmember Rusing,
Present.
Councilwoman Scholl, here, and Councilman Sischka.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you for that. Item 6A, please.
Announcement regarding the Mayor's Commission on Sewer and Water Connections.
Mr. Blair,
Here.
can you tell us about? You already did that.
First of all, thank you, Mayor, for seeing the importance in what we have talked about for a long time here in the community. And I think Mr. Woodward's presentation probably shines a light on it better than what I could have by any means. So the whole idea behind this Commission of Sewer and Water and the connections, the scope is to provide insight and to assist the mayor and provide update reports to the city council and provide leadership and partnership with community members on sewer and water connections needed inside and outside the city. This commission will look at funding elements, different policies in the future, community outreach, public education. And the main objectives are to study the problems related to the lack of sewer availability, the policies that could address problems identified, and look at how we're going to improve the quality of life within our community. The key deliverable items in 2020 are to identify key areas of engagement and policy priorities for the city and the commission, which will be tough in itself. I always call it going after the low-hanging fruit first. So identify the funding opportunities for the property owners to connect to the city's wastewater and the wastewater systems, as well as we heard today, an opportunity also to maybe offer incentives to those on septic systems. So it would be a two-prong approach to take people off of septics, but while we're doing that and looking at how to achieve that is to give them an avenue of maybe partnering with them through financial ability to change out some of their old-time devices inside their house. So this is going to take a lot of effort. We're looking at a liaison group or membership, and the commission membership will be between 5 and 7. And at this point in time, I have looked at 6 members to be selected. I have a list of those going on right now. And I would be the 7th one, which would be a tiebreaker on any vote. If anybody's watching it is interested that is on a septic system or like to be part of what we're putting together, they can feel free to call me at 928-710-1962. All the members will be appointed by the mayor once I submit him the list. The mayor will also appoint the city council person to serve as chairman. I guess I've already got that because I have a new chair. Did anybody see? I've got a new chair. So I guess being the sewer guy, I get a new chair.
Well, what happened to the rest of us?
I know I feel blessed. Members will serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and also this is going to take probably a better part of a year and a half to 2 years to come up. It's going to be very intensive with staff, and thank you, Gwen, and everybody at Public Works and Community Development, putting together maps showing sewered and unsewered areas, watered areas, and a crossover map. Also going out to the different areas like North Prescott Sewer District and contacting each individual property owner on a septic system, setting up public meetings, putting together options, engineering plans for the main trunk line, financial assistance through the city, and all the things that we're going to have to put together is going to take a while, but I'm hell-bent to get this done. So even looking at the city of Prescott, who I always talk about, Hokagan, for 50-plus years outside the city limits on septic systems that are old, and we provide them with water, and we have an opportunity to really make a difference and recharge some of those waters back into our sanitary sewers. So that's the mission statement. Hopefully, we have set up a meeting for next Wednesday or next Tuesday with staff to talk about our next steps forward, and we'll get this thing rolling.
Well, I appreciate that presentation, and this is extremely important work. As you know, Councilman Blair, in our water model, we can see very quickly, as we saw a minute ago, that the septic systems that we have really is the biggest place we can capture a lot of water back into our aquifer. And you've got a wealth of experience with water and the sewer systems, been in the city a long time, and so you're the right person for the job, and I really appreciate you stepping up to do this.
I'm not sure I stepped up or I was appointed.
It's called voluntold.
I think it was mutual, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring together a lot of good people to try to find out to do some good things for our community.
Thank you, Councilman. Let's move on to consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from consent? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items 7A through 7C.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
At this point, I'd like to withdraw from my vote. I have put all the window coverings in for the U.S. vets on Whipple Street. I have no financial gain in it. I donated the blinds at cost, but I feel like I should not vote on this item.
Okay, so let's pull, if we could, you want to amend to pull item C?
Okay, I amend to pull item C.
Okay, so we're now voting on the consent agenda items 7A through 7B. And we had a second. Can I get a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right, now we'll entertain a motion on item C.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda item C, 7C.
I have a motion and a second. And Councilman Blair wants to recuse on this one, so please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll move on to item 8A, please.
Public hearing and consideration for an owner and location transfer liquor license application for a Series 6 bar liquor license from Amy S. Nations, applicant for the Attic. The application fee has been paid. The sign has been posted for the required 20 days. Staff has reviewed the application and determined that it is in compliance. No public comments have been received at this time.
All right. Do we have did you say the applicant was here? I'm sorry.
Yes, she is here.
Oh, come on up, guys. I've been hearing good things about the Attic.
Wonderful.
And I've actually been up there with Jason not too long ago to see the room looks amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, give us a quick snapshot what you guys are doing up there.
Okay, so I guess the baseline of everything is that we wanted to enrich this town's arts community. I grew up here. I'm third generation here, and we have a teenage son, and he was just making a comment one day about the arts community, how we don't really have a whole lot of it here, and so that's where we want to make a difference. I know you're like a bar, but it's not just that. We want to have live music, artistic, like
Seminars,
workshops, like educational workshops from different artists from all around the world that come and teach. And then, you know, just like we have a bunch of things on the list that I'm a little nervous right now.
Mostly a lot of local live music and in that genre.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, it's a cool space up there. I appreciate you guys activating that space again, investing in it, and investing in
There's a lot
Prescott.
of cool history in that
Yeah.
building.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, finding out the history of that while doing all of the work ourselves. You know, his father came out from Florida to join us. He has some contract experience, and, you know, we stripped the floors down ourselves and we resealed them. We built a stage completely ourselves. We redid the outer deck so that we, you know, because this dude's food is directly below us, so we made sure that that was all sealed and protected. And, you know, so just having the pride of doing everything ourselves from the beginning and having the support of the community the whole time. We documented all of it. We put it on social media, so people were stopping by throughout the whole process that we'd never even met before. And they were like, hey, we see what you're doing. We're excited. So that was really encouraging. So
Sounds like a lot of sweat equity. That's good.
it is.
Yeah.
But it's worth
It's
it.
worth it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much again for activating that space. Very cool.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
your.
you for allowing us to have this opportunity and this platform.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Mayor, I move to approve recommendation for a liquor license application number 88138 for an owner location transfer for a Series 6 bar liquor license for Attic, location 214 South Montezuma Street, Suite 3.
Second.
C? Then I will amend that in street, because we have, it should be C.
Suite C. Okay.
Suite C.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that too.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right. Let's move on to item 8A2.
Public hearing and consideration for an owner and location transfer for a Series 6 liquor license application from Amy S. Nations, applicant for Montezuma Alley, location 214 South Montezuma Street. The application fee has been paid and the sign has been posted for the required 20 days. Staff has reviewed the application and determined that it is in compliance and no public comments have been received.
Okay. Applicant. This is a different
This is a different
owner.
I think it's
different
patio
business,
bar.
but it is also, no.
Yep.
I don't
Okay.
think they're here, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. This is the back patio, kind of that other venue in the back. Okay. We'll move on and entertain a motion there.
Mayor, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Mayor, I move to approve recommendation for liquor license application number 88099 for an owner transfer for a Series 6 bar liquor license for Montezuma Alley located at 214 South Montezuma Street.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's move on to item 9A, please.
Introduction and appointment of members to the Mayor's Commission on Wellbeing.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody? It's a very nice day. Very excited about today. We've been talking about this now for probably 2 years. It came on my radar about 3 years ago when I read an article about Prescott being recognized as a community of well-being. So I started researching the metrics as to how they determined that. It was a Gallup poll, and we were recognized as like one of the, I think, top 25 cities with well-being. And I looked at those metrics and I thought, I think we can actually improve upon those. And it's taken a while for us to get to this point because there's been a lot on our agenda over the last 2 years. But I'm very happy today to introduce our folks that have agreed to serve on this commission, to be commissioners for well-being. It's pretty much a blank slate. I think we can do something really great here for the city. I've said this often, we do a lot for tourists, we do a lot for businesses and economic development, and this, I feel, is something that we can do for our citizens, that we can show and communicate how we are, even make it a better community of well-being and vibrancy. So I'm very excited about it. I will tell you, I've probably had 50 people tell me, Billy, I would like to do that. So we're going to make these meetings open to the public. We'd like to be able to have a call to the public so that once we get going with the commission, people will be able to come with ideas and suggestions, and we can incorporate that and really make this something great for the city of Prescott, hopefully over the next 4 years. So right now I would like to introduce the commissioners. Well, not commissioners yet, but you will be once you do your swearing in. I'll start with Peg Travers. Peg, you want to come on up? Peg Travers, many of you know her. Certainly she's with our board of parks, and Peg has been really good in so many areas with the city. You can come on up here, Peg. The idea that we have 12 pickleball courts to Peg Travers, because she's actually the regional director, one of the national Southwest region for pickleball. In addition to that, she also does meditation, teaches classes. She has a lot to offer. Next, I'd like to bring up John Murphy. John Murphy is a neighbor and a friend, and I will tell you, he is just filled with energy. He is a person that has talked about longevity, and not only that you live a longer life, but you live a healthier, longer life. And so that's one of the reasons that we actually kind of got started on this, is to look at longevity, because we have a lot of older people in our community. They've retired. We want them to give them a good second half of their life. So John is also very involved with the gardening, and so that's going to be a plus. Next, I'd like to bring up Cecilia Jernigan. Cecilia is very active in our community in lots of ways. She is actually a guru on social media, and I know she's going to be able to help us get the word out, and I appreciate all that she's done. Also, let's have Karen. I know as Karen Price. I'm going to have Karen say her last name. I'm going to learn that, Karen. Thank you very much. And I've known Karen for a very long time. Karen's done extensive research about food and food with prevention, and how people that are going through rehab, they're missing some nutrients. And it's very difficult for the people to get well if you're not getting all the nutrients. She also produced a documentary called What the Food? And she's got a lot of great information that's going to help us. Next, I'd like to bring up Lori Kennedy. Lori is no stranger to the city. She's a volunteer on many accounts for us. She was an ambassador, and now she's working with Embry-Riddle. Lori is a marketing expert, and we're going to need a lot of marketing. And so, Lori, appreciate you doing this. And now I'd like to bring up my friend Bonnie McMahon. Bonnie's been quite involved in the city over the last couple of years, and I've gotten to know her quite well, and she's involved in many groups around the city. She also is big into health. She teaches privately Pilates in her home, has a lot of good attributes to bring. Terry Fernetti. Come on up, Terry. I've known Terry for quite a while as well, and you guys all know Terry Fernetti. She is the voice of our health department. She knows all things healthy in Yavapai County, and what a tremendous asset that she's going to be to this commission, so I appreciate that. We have two members that are not with us today. Vicki Johnson, you all know her as the water steward. She has a radio show. She has a store at the mall. She knows a lot about water and a lot about health, so she will also be a great plus for this commission. And finally, and certainly not last, is Jesse Burke. Jesse is a very good friend of mine. He is involved in many aspects of our city. He's been working with Agape House. He's on a couple of boards. He's part of the Prescott Young Professionals. He is a pastor and a wonderful man. And today we have him in our prayers as he's with his wife who was in surgery. Also, Vicki Johnson's not here because she had a death in her family. So she's back east for that. So can we give a round of applause to these people? It's going to be great, and I just look forward to what's going to come from this commission to help all of our citizens in the city of Prescott. So, of course, we can get a picture. And you can put it on social media. All right. Yeah. Great to see all of you. Oh, Miss Deb. All right, you're going to teach me your name. I'm such a phonetic person. Good to see you, Lori. Terry, thank you for doing this.
You're welcome, Ray.
All right, here we go. Now, once we're done, you guys have to go out and do your, are you going to do it here?
Yes, I'm going to provide your oath of office for all of you right here, and then if you could exit out this door, Jennifer from my office is going to be right outside there. I'm just going to have you sign it and give you some, some paperwork.
I didn't know you knew
Hold
how
on,
to
Tyler,
count
one
to
more.
three, Tyler.
Oh, I'm vain. Thank you so much. All right, you guys, thank you. Congratulations.
Okay, before you go, let's do this.
Nicely done, Tyler.
With all of you, if you don't mind standing up here for me, please. I'll have you all raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I,
Claire Barneville, do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and
of
laws
the State of Arizona,
of the State of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and defend them
and defend them
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of a Mayor's Commission on Well-Being member
of Mayor's Commission on Well-Being member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So I do affirm.
So I do affirm.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you all. Let's move on to item 9B, please.
Legislative update.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tyler Goodman from the City Manager's Office. I'm going to try to go through this quickly, but stop me if you have any questions on certain bills. To date, there's been over 1,000 bills dropped, which is creating a lot of work, especially for the League of Cities to go through all of those. I'm going to also, as we go through this throughout this legislative session, I'll give you updates on some deadlines. So coming up, the lawmakers in the Senate have until February 3rd to introduce legislation, and in the House, they have until February 10th. So you're going to see a lot of bills introduced, and then a lot of bills getting assigned to committees. So far, there hasn't been a lot of committee action, especially on bills that we're tracking from a city perspective. I'm going to jump through some of these. Again, stop me if you have questions, but for funding, jumping down to the regional park appropriation that we've talked about, there is a bill number now, 2284, that's Representative Campbell's bill, and there was a slight change. Instead of appropriating $5 million, it's $5.3 million, and that would be to establish a regional park within Yavapai County. Jumping down to a couple other things, there is a bill that came up this last week, House Bill 2313, about fire sprinklers in existing buildings. And if this makes it through the process, it would, the city could not require the installation of fire sprinklers in existing buildings that were not required to have them when the building was constructed. And there's a few exceptions to that are listed there in your update. But that could prove interesting to see how that would work out and the true impacts that would have. Jumping down to the PSPRS cancer presumption bill, Senate Bill 1160. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. This would include breast and ovarian cancer on the list of covered cancers for presumptions. It would also, because currently under the legislation or under statute, currently a claim can be rebutted by a preponderance of evidence that there is a specific cause of cancer other than the occupation. This bill would remove that. So it would add even kind of an extra layer there. It did pass through the Senate Higher Ed and Workforce Development Committee yesterday. What's interesting, though, and I need to gather more information on this aspect of it, they are discussing funding on how to actually fund the increase that this would cause for cities and towns and others within PSPRS. That'll be interesting to see. I don't have a lot of information on that. I've just kind of heard it in passing from the league and from others. So I'll keep an eye on that, see how that goes. A bill that could help a lot of cities, help cities in general, Senate Bill 1280, has to do with expenditure limitations. This would allow for any dollars being spent to pay down the unfunded liability for PSPRS. It would not count against our expenditure limitation, so that would help. And then I want to jump to House Bill 2093. This is the one that has to do with the Second Amendment and federal laws. This has been assigned to a committee, the Ways and Means in the House, but is not on an agenda yet. And then finally, the executive session and security plans. This would help cities be able to address those things within executive session. That's a good bill. It passed through the House Technology Committee and will be going to a couple others this upcoming week. Overall, things are busy in the legislature. They kind of expected this. A lot of things trying to get done during an election year. But things are good and they're rolling. So with that, that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Very good, Tyler. Hey, one other question regarding this is kind of at a federal level.
Yes.
With our sewer and water connections commission that Councilman Blair is working on, we're looking for funding. Is there anything going on at the federal level that might emerge in this regard?
Yes, I gave you a handout. It has to do, this comes from Congressman Greg Stanton. It's the Environmental Infrastructure Assistance Act. They're looking for specifically the city of Prescott support on this legislation at the federal level. What it would do is authorize $150 million through the Army Corps of Engineers. It would go towards environmental infrastructure programs in Arizona. So it would be for design and construction of water-related environmental infrastructure like wastewater treatment plants, water supply, surface water resource protection, and other things. There's more information on this handout I gave you. They are looking for a yay or nay from the city if we're willing to support them on that. Barry Aarons, I've discussed it with him. He's in favor of it. He sees it as a very good positive thing. And so he's recommending that we do, but I wanted to bring it to you for that.
Tyler brought this to me earlier this week, recently, and I thought it was a great idea, but I did think it was important to bring to the council for you to see and give an approval if you think this is a good idea.
Never, never a downside, and we can bring some of those federal dollars back here to help out our situation.
Absolutely.
Any questions, comments from the council?
So, Mayor, can I ask, so do we need to write something? Tyler, will you just deliver that we're in support, or what happens?
I was going to let Barry know that. If he requires, if Congressman Stanton wants a letter, I'm happy to draft that. There are some examples that they sent to me of other cities in Arizona that are supporting it.
Councilmember Rusing?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on the $5.3 million possible allocation. I think it's wonderful that we bring our state tax dollars back that we send down to Phoenix to be reinvested in our community. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, I think you can go ahead and draft that letter for Congressman Stanton for my signature on behalf of the council.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Tyler. Let's move on to item C, please.
Approval of City Contract Number 2019-106A1, First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with Strength Training Incorporated, Occupational Health for Comprehensive Wellness and Fitness Testing for Firefighters for an additional $24,195.
Oh, Tyler's taller than I am even. Well, first off, good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, Dennis Light, Fire Chief with the City of Prescott. The item this afternoon that you're considering is in support of our ongoing medical and physical monitoring necessary for our members. This is related to a number of performance federal standards that we're required as firefighters to adhere to, specifically those related to firefighting, Code of Federal Regulations 1910-120, 1910-146. 1910-120 is the hazardous materials element of our job. 1910-120 is those environments in which we operate in a immediately dangerous to life and health environment. The OSHA fire respiratory protection standard, as well as NFPA consensus standards, which is 1582, which is occupational medical health for firefighters. As a little bit of background, our firefighters each year are put through a series of 3 types of physical assessments. First is the one being brought before you today, and that's the NFPA 1582 compliant physical. Physical is overseen by a certified occupational medicine physician and includes, but is not limited to, auditory visual acuity, EKG, hepatitis, and TB testing, full chemical panel blood draws, chest x-ray, treadmill-based stress tests, pulmonary function tests, respiratory fit testing, as well as a comprehensive hands-on medical physical. Upon regular such medical clearances being obtained, our employees also go through 2 other standardized processes over the course of the year. The first is the Gherkin Protocol, where we administer that in-house as part of our peer fitness trainers to ensure the wellness of our firefighters. And secondary to that is the PAC test, which is a federal requirement for our folks when they work in the wildland-urban interface. Latter part of 2018, our current vendor within the affiliation of YRMC discontinued their occupational medicine. And back in 2018, it kind of left us in a little bit of a pickle. We were kind of faced with, we needed to get our physicals completed, but we did not have a local provider. So we did some environmental scanning specific to the Valley and other like-size agencies, and we arrived at Strength STI as the vendor of choice. And that was brought about, first off, by some feedback received from those municipalities, but more importantly, an existing contract in place that the city of Glendale had with that particular firm. So that provided us means to do the 1582 compliant physicals, which we did in the last fiscal year in May of 2019. Fast forward a little bit to the budgetary process for the current year. We allocated monies again for the need for our physicals, recognizing we were short funded in the last fiscal year because the cost of these physicals went up fairly significantly from a local provider. But the current provider comes on site and does them at a rental place here in town that they rent to run all our folks through. When we entered into this next year, this is where a lot of confusion said, and frankly, I made some missteps along the way. First and foremost was when it transitioned from one fiscal year to another, it exceeded the department authorized amount of $25,000 for approval, at which time it didn't trigger anything. We've kind of put some control measures in place to kind of forbid that from happening again moving forward. But looking back, it was just a mistake that we made. Not with purpose or design, it's just one that we made. With that, we've currently completed the physicals in October of this past year, at which time now we've been invoiced for the balance of those physicals. This amendment, based upon legal input, as the most efficient means to get to us where we need to be, and that's to expend the dollars that are available in today's budget to pay for those physicals. And with that, I'd welcome any questions.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Chief. I appreciate you owning the mistake, the oversight, and more importantly, having measures in place moving forward to make sure that that doesn't happen, because I do understand this is, required testing that you guys do have to do.
Yes, sir. And nobody's more embarrassed than I am regarding this mistake. You have to eat crow sometimes in this job. When you're the leader, I'll take this one. I own it. And, hopefully we can move forward.
Yep. Councilman Good?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was concerned about the terms and the length of this contract, where it's absolutely clear that it was a one-year contract not to exceed $21,000. And if it should exceed that, then any amendments had to be approved by the council. So the simple math would indicate that in order for you to complete your testing of your firefighters, it was easy to predict that this would far exceed your authority as a department head. But to go over to 120% over the contract with no one catching it is pretty questionable. Both parties knew when they signed it that that was the limit. But neither party honored that agreement, and we continued to make the payments for over a year, right?
No, that's not quite correct. We have yet to pay on the balance. We're pending this amendment in order to do that.
Stopped paying at $21,000?
Actually, it was about $22,156, I think is what it was.
So you've got almost a year's worth of back due invoices at this point?
No, sir. The second set of physicals took place this past October in this fiscal year.
Okay, so the contract was signed on December 20th of 18.
That is correct.
And expired on December 20th of 19.
That's correct.
but the testing continued and exceeded the entire cost of the contract.
That's correct, and that's why we've brought back this amendment to make right on my mistake.
How much were you paying to YRMC for the same testing?
I don't know that exactly. I believe it was in the $460 to $500 range per employee.
And this is 720 at minimum and maybe 820 depending on other concerns.
No, it is 720 fixed. There are some added tests. Should somebody be revealed with a personal physical ailment for which it requires advanced chemical testing. For example, if they test positive for TB, those kind of subsequent tests could be add-ons.
Yeah, and all-inclusive with a cardiopulmonary, it's kind of like a stress treadmill kind of deal.
That's correct. And our previous provider was unable to provide that particular element, even though it was within 1582 NFPA.
Well, clearly the work was done, and I think we're obligated to pay the professional their cost to that. But it's just head-scratching to me that we could go over so far without really anybody noticing it until the whole contract and testing had been completed. Those are my comments, I guess, but
Understand.
I'm not going to object to the payment or the amendment. So will we see a new contract?
Yes, sir.
An RFP?
Recognizing whether we go an RFP or we look to, first and foremost, I think the provider of this particular physical was the most comprehensive and responsive provider. What we will do is most certainly offer our due diligence to ensure value and financial considerations are taken into account to ensure that the credibility of the physical needs are completed by whatever vendor may be selected in the future. But yes, it would require a new contract.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Rusing.
Oh, I just wanted to thank you for keeping an eye on our wonderful firefighters and making sure they're in good health. And I understand the importance, coming from a healthcare background, of the annual physicals to get baselines and to catch any problems in an early stage, because they are exposed to a lot of toxic materials in the smoke and when they go into fires. I'd like to direct a few comments to the legal department concerning contract number 2019-106. It was in my packet. It's the contract tracking sheet. There's no date on it, and I'd like to see a date. Also, it says physicals, exams, and ancillary medical services for professional firefighters. It's kind of open-ended. It doesn't say how many firefighters. And I think that's might be one of the problems why it might have gotten out of hand, is we didn't have any designation as to how many firefighters and the cost per firefighter, which I believe was $790. So if we just include some numbers and do some simple math, I think it would really help keep these contracts from getting out of hand. Thank you.
Just to respond to that, the cover sheet is a document used, I think, by the clerk's office to help keep track. So the actual contract itself usually has a scope of work attached to it and incorporated into the contract that will look at the amount charged. And this one probably wouldn't have the number of firefighters. It's whoever needed a physical.
Yeah, to some degree, Councilwoman Rosing, Mayor, it is a slightly moving target in the sense we know what our static full-time equivalents are. We have 60 personnel in PSPRS for which physicals are required. But then when we add new employees through attrition, retirements and such, we just onboarded 3, which also is part of this. That's why the numbers are kind of, I'll use the IT firm, wonky, that they don't quite add up, that there's 63 physicals that were completed when we have 60 employees.
Okay.
But to your point, we'll get together with the clerk's office and make sure that cover sheet
Because
has a date on
most
it.
contracts, like leases, they have a cover sheet that lays out all the terms, so you can glance at it and hit the high points without going through all the boilerplate legalese. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the council? Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right. I'll entertain. Oh. Wait. I'm sorry. Dr. Scary, do you want to address this item? Oh, okay. Come to the podium, please.
Hi, Doc.
I think God just sent me here for this reason.
I didn't even invite you.
For your amazing job with your firefighters. When we get a sick patient, they're there. Anyone who is they wanted, they're there. It would be my honor. The city doesn't pay for your physicals. I would do it for 5 years for free for the firefighters in our town. So you guys need to go through this. It would be my pleasure to take care of our firefighters. Send them to me, I'll take care of them.
I think we should look into that, Mr. Mayor, Manager.
The price is right, if nothing else.
For free.
Does that come with a lunch?
You know what? With all respect, let me not go there.
All right.
But if I could offer, Dr. Ascari, first and foremost, thank you very much for that very kind offer. I will reach out to you post-meeting perhaps or down the road and ensure that because one of my requirements is to fulfill the federal regulations, so I want to make sure it's still comprehensive, and I'm fully aware of your services, and I think we can probably make that work.
If anything I could do, I would do it for them, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that offer. Thank you, Doc. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Dr. Scari, I just wanted to say thank you for your generosity and your offer. Hopefully we can make that work.
And Councilman Good.
Yeah, just one last comment on the contract tracking sheet. I know it does say at the top that include the expiration date. I think it's referring to the certificate of liability. And the liability insurance certificate attached expired March 1st, 2019. So that extra testing that occurred was under a liability certificate that had already expired. So
Well, at
that's
least
an
they
additional
hadn't
concern.
given us their updated one if they had one.
Yeah, we most certainly can arrange that.
Very good. Thanks for pointing that out. At this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2019-106A1.
Second?
I have a motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council.
Yep. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to item D. I will recuse myself on this particular item.
Adoption of resolution number 2020-1735, approving as an amendment to the Whispering Rock pre-annexation and development agreement, city contract number 2019-101, and authorizing the mayor and staff to take any and all steps necessary to accomplish the above.
Thank you very much. Matt, do you want to present this?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is, as discussed by the clerk, the second amendment to the Whispering Rock pre-annexation development agreement. Going back to the adage, what's old is new again. Originally, we placed into this development agreement who would be responsible for off-site utility improvements. And at the time of the original document, it would have been the owner, in this case, Dr. Ascari as the owner under the development agreement, who would put in off-site public improvements that meet city standards, to include the construction cost of upsizing a water main to the property, which in and of itself included 790 feet of water main from the transmission main in Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University to Willow Creek Road. At the request of the owner, that was changed with the First Amendment, wherein the city of Prescott was going to do the off-site improvements, and then the owner would reimburse us. The owner has now come back and asked us to go back to the original deal for financing purposes. So the language in the amendment, number 2, is the same exact language in the original DA. And that's what we're voting on today. The reason we write that the way we normally do is it's generally easier and quicker for the owners to build these off-site utility improvements to city standards. And more often than not, they can come in at a little bit cheaper because they don't have to deal with the bureaucracy of us bidding out the project and having weekly meetings and things like that. So that, in a nutshell, is we're back to the original agreement regarding utility improvements. Mr. Dotseth is here if you have any technical questions regarding the improvements.
Thank you, Matt. And comments, we have Councilman Steve Blair.
Question, Matt, if you don't mind, please, sir. Both amendments, as I see it, were voted on by the sitting city council 7-0, and we've gone back to the original agreement without any changes other than who's going to ultimately pay for it. The dollars are the same, so I really don't see an issue with this other than changing the verbiage.
Do we have any other comments from council? Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you very much. I would just like to clarify for the public record, we're talking about how many linear feet of sewer line?
Councilmember Rusing, let's first of all,
water line.
We'll get the right water pipe.
Yes.
So it's a water system.
Water main.
And we're talking about up to 790 feet of 16-inch ductile iron pipe.
16-inch ductile iron. And what is your estimate to be the cost? Because if we're going to be funding it, it'd be nice to have a number.
Our estimate would be between 150 and 200,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman, feel good. Thank you.
That's me.
Yeah.
And I also wanted for the public record to know that with this upgraded water line, it not only will benefit the development in question, but also provide more efficient and higher capacity for all the commercial developments throughout Willow Creek all the way down to the auto dealers.
That's correct. It will improve everything on the Willow Creek corridor down through the Heritage Park area to the dealers down in the Willow Creek, Willow Lake Road area.
And we can probably anticipate future commercial developments on Willow Creek going northeast.
It opens up those opportunities as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I see that amending the amendment is going to be cheaper for the city and it will be done faster for Whispering Rock. So do we have any public comment?
We do. Tom Rusing. Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Public
All
comment.
right. Very good. Any other comments? Can we have a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt resolution number 2020-1735, approving city contract 2019-101A2.
Very good. Have a second. Second. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. So we will move on now to our next item. And Mayor's rejoining us.
Approval of city contract number 2020-143 with Wildan Engineering for outsourcing of building services for an initial contract period February 2020 to June 2020 in an amount not to exceed $173,845.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Bryn Stotler, Director of Community Development. I'm back in front of you. As you may recall, 2 weeks ago, I presented to you at study session regarding an RFP process that was undertaken by the Community Development Department last fall. And as a result of that process, we arrived at a selected firm, Wildan Engineering, who I also introduced you to, Steve Bax, their project manager, and Autumn Woolman, their chief building official and deputy director of their department. I'm back in front of you at this council meeting to present a draft contract, and the hope being that we can move through some of the details and entertain any of your questions. But just to recap the contract terms, the initial contract is proposed for an initial 5-month period to finish out the fiscal year, February, March, April, May, June. February, technically, where the contract awarded would be to accommodate training and alignment with our community development processes. As you are probably aware, the services contemplated under the contract are electronic permitting support, which I referenced at the last presentation as well, and that specifically is in regards to our express permitting process that we use in our production builder environments in the North Prescott area. Namely, the communities that these builders serve are primarily Granite Dells Estates, Walden Farms, and Deepwell Ranch. There is an additional amount contemplated as a part of this contract number after discussions with the city manager to afford some opportunity for us to engage them for fire plan review across all communities or all of our business, because fire plan review is a very difficult discipline to hire staff into. And at this time, we have 2 positions. Only one of our fire protection specialists is really able to complete comprehensive fire plan review for both commercial and residential projects. So with the agreement of the city manager, we did include an additional $15,000 to allocate to fire plan review, an allowance basically, and to see how those the fire plan review services would go under this contract as well. As a part of the due diligence with this contract, I checked a number of references, not only those provided by Willdan directly, which were comprehensive to say the least. They are statewide. They have operated in a number of northern Arizona communities, Page, Parker, Tucson. Not all of them are apples to apples when it comes to Prescott's business, but they also have a great representation in their business model in the Valley. And I did capture a number of great references from those jurisdictions. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'll go through a couple of those comments. But I wanted to let you know that I also took the reference check a step further. I wanted to understand how Willdan's support is received by the builders and developers on the ground. So while we can get a glowing report from a jurisdiction who has a contract with Willdan, what we really want to know is how does their staff and their service model line up with those builders and developers that are working in these busy communities. And I found that there was a lot of positive commentary that I'd like to share a little bit with you. Just to start out, the town of Tucson, it's a little bit of an anomaly. Doesn't really, it's not apples to apples with Prescott, but Cynthia Steelhammer, who is their city manager, indicated that their community has been involved in a 9+ year contract with Willdan and outsourced literally all of their building services to this firm, and they have had really no complaints. City of Goodyear, Randy Westacott, their chief building official. Randy is somebody that we actually work with across our ASBO and building institutes, and so we're familiar with him. He actually, in the City of Goodyear, has Willdan staff embedded in his internal operation. So while he has City of Goodyear staff, he also has Willdan contracted employees that sit elbow to elbow with his plan reviewers and that go out and ride-alongs and perform their own inspection work. Some of his comments were, plan review comments are thorough and on point. First round reviews were so good that he used them as a training model for his existing staff. Willdan team members are an extension of my team. And Autumn Woolman, who you met at our last meeting, his quote is, "She hires quality people." When I got out to the builder community, Garrett Walker Homes, I spoke with Joe Gillespie, a project manager who has worked extensively with Willdan via a contract with the city of Avondale. His comments reflected that the inspectors, quote, "provide excellent service, by far the best I've worked with across all jurisdictions and firms in the Valley." A couple of other builder comments, developer comments. Shea Connolly Development, I spoke with Bart Shea, who's an owner principal, and he has interfaced with Willdan via contracts in Fountain Hills and the town of Maricopa. And his quotes are, "We work with Willdan extensively and love them, worked with them all," meaning other vendors of building services, and Willdan outshines them all. Again, a reference to Autumn Woolman. Autumn oversees the teams and does not break rules. They are quick, efficient, and ahead of the game. And then I spoke with Jason Ray, a field superintendent for Shea Homes, who is working with Wildan via a contract in Wickenburg, Arizona, perhaps more of a apples-to-apples comparison for our jurisdiction. His comments on their plan review service for the production builds were no issues and excellent service. Now, while those are all glowing reviews, and I just wanted to let council know that we took it one step beyond just those references provided directly by Wildan and dug down and got to the folks who were actually interfacing with their staffing out in the field. And I was very pleased with those comments. I hope you are too. With regard to the fire plan review aspect, it was interesting because we had a fire plan reviewer, a very experienced lady that came over from Contra Costa County in California, and has established her home in Prescott. She worked for us for a period of time last spring, and due to some personal issues, she needed more flexibility in her schedule, so she left our part-time employment, but she actually has worked with Wildan previously and is in the process of getting back on with Wildan. So the potential exists for us to actually have somebody handling our fire plan reviews that has already been a City of Prescott employee. All very encouraging. Wildan, of course, represented to the council at the last meeting that they intend to set up a Prescott office. I do believe they are moving forward with that, regardless of whether this contract is awarded. They intend to be a presence in the Prescott area, and they would be the sole purveyor of these specific types of services to the Prescott building community if they are successful in doing that, and I do believe that they plan to. That's basically a recap of activities to date with regard to the contract. If you have any questions, I'm most happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Bren. Thanks for doing work on this. I think for me, where I sit, the problem to solve here is to reduce the amount of time it takes for a permit to get through our process. And so I like the idea of adding more people that are qualified to review, particularly up north where you have more homogeneous type building happening in those flatter areas up north. I think it makes a lot of sense. I like this idea of the 5-month contract as well, where we can really, I see it as a test to see how Wildan performs, to see if we see a reduced amount of time on our permit turnaround, and then as well, is this efficient financially? Which, I don't think you can totally smoke that out until you actually put it into play. And we can analyze some numbers, and I know you're committed to doing that analysis after 3 or 4 months of seeing this in play, which will be really helpful for the council to analyze not only how much time it takes to turn around a permit, but as well financially, what is this model doing for us. So I like the fact that you went the extra mile and went to the end user, the developer, the builder. Those are the people that really matter. Those are the folks that have been frustrated at times with us, and so I appreciate you doing that. It was very intelligent on your part to go out to those builders and developers. So again, thanks for your work on this. I see this as a potential solution, particularly for a market that changes. At times we see highs and lows in the market. That's just how things work. And this could allow us to really flex with our personnel with the market ups and downs as well. So again, thanks for your work on this. Councilmember Russi.
Thank you. I just want to say that there's no doubt that the engineers have impeccable credentials and impeccable reputation. I would like to also say thank you for having the review in May of 2020, and that there's 2 aspects to this. This contract is going to be for the builders that are doing mass production and mass grading, and we also have our local contractors, our smaller contractors, and by hiring this firm, as I understand it, is supposed to also expedite by freeing up more staff to help our local contractors who have lived in this community for many years, raised their families, and been parts of our community to get their plans approved quicker than 4 to 5 weeks. And also on the last page under financial impact, could you please explain partial cost recovery, approximately 25% of total plan review? Because I was under the impression that this was going to be, this contract was going to be covered 100% by the fees paid by the production builders.
Thank you for that question, and it's very relevant to the discussion of the contract. The plan review portion of the services that are proposed under the contract are the opportunity for cost recovery. In essence, what happens when we receive a plan is we take the requisite time to review the plan, we invoice the plan. Plans in for production builder home sites and that vertical construction, they average about $750 to $1,200 per plan review on average, depending on complexity of the site. And what we bill the builder would be actually, we would only pay Willdan 75% of the total amount of the plan review fee, which means that 25% that is paid by the builder on all plan review fees would be recaptured and come back into the general fund. The building inspection piece, it functions a little bit differently. Building inspection, there's a certain requisite number of inspections per build that are expected. And that's kind of built into the building permit fee itself. We still capture the building permit fee from the builder. That is not something that interacts with Willdan's contract. It's a little bit more difficult to quantify on a per inspection basis because there are, like I said, 12 to 14 inspections per production home build. Some of them do need to be repeated based on whether or not things were in order when the inspector gets there. But again, that fee is more reflected in a master building permit fee that is applied to the invoicing at the end of the issuance of the permit. So the builder does pay for that inspection piece. It's just embedded within a master building permit fee. So the main opportunity for cost recovery is in the plan review realm, where we will have we will be paying Willdan 75% of a total plan review fee on a per house basis. 25% of that will come back to the city, to the general fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. It seems like, this is my 5th year on council, and it just seems like the time that it takes for us to get permits out. I've heard this for over and over with contractors and builders out there, and even home folks that will come up to me and say, it's taking forever for us to get this permit. I think this is such a great step in the right direction. And I remember when Michael came forward and said, what do you think about this idea? We would privatize a portion of this. And Bren, you were so receptive of that, and appreciate that. And so I think it's a great step forward, and I really hope that it does, in fact, help us move the permitting along while keeping the standards that we want at the same time. And I like the idea that you're adding the fire plan review to this contract. So and it is a pilot program, like the mayor was saying. So it's 5-6 months.
That initial term gives us the option and opportunity to evaluate performance as well as economy.
And I was really impressed with the Willdan folks. So thank you, Brent. Thank you, Michael.
Councilman Good.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I also, in general, support the opportunity to look at outsourcing projects like this that are particularly applicable to growth or other situations that sometimes aren't predictable and sustainable. So it's a lot easier to modify contracts with contractors than have to bring on employees and then have to make the painful decision sometimes to reduce size. So that's great. And I also like the idea that we're going to have probably 4 solid months of actual experience before we consider a longer-term contract. So I think that should be sufficient to be able to evaluate the effectiveness and uncover any problem areas that could be solved in a future contract. I do know that we have a couple of our contracting professionals in the audience, And I would particularly like to encourage them to monitor if they have that experience to work with the Wildan inspectors to bring their concerns forward so we can understand what our local contracting association thinks about this and can help us determine a long-term commitment to Wildan or other permitting professionals. So I think that's it's nice to be able to have a short-term evaluation period before we commit to a longer-term financial commitment. Thank you.
Public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right. We'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, move to approve, I believe I've got the right one, which I usually don't. Move to approve city contract 2020-143.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right. Let's move on to item F, please.
Approval of city contract number 2018-128A4 with Cary Environmental Services, LLC, amending city contract number 2018-128A3 and increasing the contract amount by $125,000 for the Spring 2020 Household Hazardous Waste event.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Ian Mattingly, Traffic, Streets, and Solid Waste Manager. Like was said, this item is for the approval of a contract amendment with Cary Environmental Services to increase funding for the household hazardous waste events. This increase will allow the city to provide a spring 2020 HHW curbside collection and disposal event. And the city has held 2 of these previous events using Cary Environmental. One was done in 2018 and then again in 2019. Those combined events served 1,033 households and collected 37 tons of hazardous material. If approved, this year's event will be held from March 2nd to March 20th, adding a 3rd week from last year. We did 2 weeks last year. We're looking at 3 weeks this year, and expanding the schedule and the number of appointment times available for our citizens. These events help the city and its citizens dispose of hazardous waste in a proper manner and avoid it being placed in the trash, poured down the drain, onto the ground, and into city storm drains. Due to these benefits, funding for this event is budgeted jointly within the solid waste, water, and wastewater divisions. And staff is requesting $125,000 not to exceed limit to cover the anticipated increase in this year's HHW event and to ensure that no additional request for funds will be needed to finish out the contract. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ian. You know, when I went through this, I was really kind of surprised at 37 tons of hazardous materials. That's a pretty big number. Well, that's helpful that it's not going down our sewage and gutters and creeks, and so it's very worthwhile. I appreciate you doing that. Councilmember Roosing.
I want to thank Ian and say that the hazardous waste disposal project is extremely important to keeping our creeks and waterways clean, and also our forest, because people will dump things out in the forest. But I see here that I have heard that there's been long lines and delays, and I see that there's a pilot individual home collection. Will we be able to have curbside pickups or call in and have someone come by? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so we used to, in 2016, 15 and 16, when we used to run the program, there were long lines, and there were, that was when we did the drop-off and all the residents would drive down to the transfer station. Since 18, when we initiated this contract, and then again in 19, we've been using the curbside collection system, and that's what we're proposing again this year. And so with this system, you can go to the website. It's not active yet because we haven't approved it, but once it's been approved, likely starting next week, we'll have a website open and phone numbers available, and the resident will call Solid Waste. They'll arrange for one of the days and a time to have the contractor come to their house. They put their materials, they box it up, and they put it out front of their house. near the garage door, and then the contractor actually comes by and picks that up for them. So they're not required to drive in or do anything. And then the contractor brings it to the transfer station where they've set up a site, and they then sort that material and then take it away and dispose of it properly. So that's what we're proposing with this money, and that's what we did last year. And so we don't have any of those traffic issues or any of those things like that, and that's how we're doing it.
So
this
it's
year.
important to get the word out and educate the public that this is an option.
Yeah, and we're ready to go on that. We just need the approval.
Councilman Good?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was initially concerned about the projected cost, but thank you for getting back to me and explaining the fact that it took a year or two for the public at large to realize that this program was in effect and to be able to utilize it. So looking at the increased volume just between 18 and 19, and then you were mentioning that we even made some accommodation for people that weren't able to get that scheduled during the 2-week window. So now we'll have 3 weeks to deal with it. And I think we will probably get some of this hazardous material handled properly now that it's much more convenient for our local residents to have it picked up than to say, gee, I'm not going to go down to the transfer station and deal with that crowd. Maybe I'll just look the other way and put it in the trash, right?
Yep, we're trying to avoid that.
So when you project that 2019 cost into 3 weeks and then multiply that over a 2-year contract, it looks pretty close. So I think overall we're doing a better job with that material. I think we'll get more cooperation from the residents and not have to deal with inadvertent hazardous material ending up in the landfill. So I support this. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Public comment?
Tom Rusing.
Tom Rusing, 2194 Forest Mountain Road. I just want to commend the Ian and the council for addressing this. Actually, it's been a pet peeve of mine. It came out in the last election how many people are concerned about it and how many times people are dumping hazardous material into multiple different sites. My concern when I saw the agenda item, but some of those issues have been addressed, is whether this is enough, because I think some people are not as patient, and I think people are still dumping things inappropriately. And I know Steve Blair is very concerned about septic systems and its effect. Well, this is even magnified because we know what's being dumped is definitely toxic, and it can work its way back into our water supply. So my only concern is it enough? And maybe we, in the future, we might be able to do it more frequently. And I think when you said you're going to have a public education, I think that's great, because I think a lot of people don't understand that. And if they realize it's going to be happening more frequently, maybe they won't be so impatient and they'll get it taken care of appropriately. And so I think this is great you're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else?
No, Mayor.
Entertain a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2018-128A4.
Second. Motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right. Then the last item G, please.
Approval of city contract number 2020-153, a professional services agreement with GeoFX Limited for aerial imaging and digital terrain mapping in the amount of $109,000. $109,759.
This is a professional services agreement with GeoFX. I'm Kat Moody. I'm the GIS coordinator for the city of Prescott. And this is a little history on some of the flights we've done in the past. The city since 2004 has been flying every 4 years on a schedule. Prior to that, we were flying every 2 years to capture aerial imagery and digital terrain mapping. And through the years, the product that's been delivered has varied over time. This contract is for the area defined here in the 2020 map, and it's for 3-inch resolution imagery. We would be capturing LiDAR data, which would provide 1-foot contours, Also, we would be capturing structures in floodplains, and the contractor would be GeoFX. The amount is just under $110,000. The previous aerial flights for the city, the most recent flight 4 years ago was also with GeoFX, and that was for a slightly smaller area, 10 square miles less. That 10 square mile difference that we've added for this contract covers areas of potential future annexation that we can project that might be coming in. That was 4-inch resolution imagery and 2-foot contours. So you do see there's a price jump between the 2016 contract and the contract that's before you today. The main differences are the imagery resolution is 3 inches instead of 4. We're capturing LiDAR data, which provides much more accurate digital terrain model. And then also the structures in floodplains is additional work capturing that data based on the LiDAR data. And the previous years here are as a reference. You can see in 2012, 8 years ago, the cost to fly was double the contract that's before you today. And at that time, our imagery was 6-inch and 1-foot resolution with a 2-foot contour. It was for a larger area. And so this data is used by all departments in the city. It's also used by our engineering contractors that we contract with for our capital improvement projects. So we provide the imagery and the contours and the DTM, the digital terrain model, to them to basically provide us the most accurate design work for our improvement projects. And with that, I'll turn it over to you all for questions.
Well, thank you, Kat. Thanks for all you do for the city. I know this is only one of a handful of things that you do for us. So, yeah, thank you for your work. Councilmember Rusing.
Thank you, Kat. I have several questions. Number one, will drones, is this drone mapping or will helicopters be used?
No, it's either, it's not, at this scale, you wouldn't use a drone for this kind of data capture. And I have this exhibit that shows because I'm throwing out the term LiDAR, and you may not be familiar with that. So LiDAR is an acronym that stands for light detection and ranging, and it's basically a plane or a helicopter, depending on what the flight company has available for use. And they have a sensor on board the aircraft. We have ground control. We have a survey company doing ground control on the ground while the flight's taking place. And then there's also a sensor as well, using GPS satellites in the sky, the sensor on the airplane, the ground control, and then there's a laser that basically is reading the surface and capturing that data. So drones are generally used for smaller areas.
Okay, and then I'd like to move on. Are we going to be doing any locating of buried utilities, any subsurface electromagnetic mapping?
No.
And then how many square miles is this project?
So this project is 113 square miles. The previous flight was 103 square miles.
And then I see that in the survey area, there's a lot of county property outside the city limits. Are they going to be participating in some of the costs of this or participating in some of the data that's being generated?
They are not participating in the cost. We have a data sharing policy with the county, and when they fly specific areas, primarily for flood control, they'll share data with us, we share data with them. They tend to fly very specific regions, so we don't often benefit from their data. They tend to benefit from our data a little more often.
Should we approach them for the cost, do you think?
So the imagery sharing agreement we have with them right now is for Google imagery that's in between these flights, that's about every 2 years, so that we don't go out for these very expensive flights. So they're actually taking the brunt of the cost for the in-between year flights. So
I didn't know we were being surveyed so carefully and in such detail.
So for instance, in 2018, the imagery or the late 2017 imagery we have in our system now came with a cost-sharing agreement with the county, which fell well below $5,000 for the city. So they're kind of making up the in-between years.
Okay.
This is much more accurate data that really serves our engineering and public works folks,
Okay.
you know, at the precision and flood control projects where we need that kind of precise information.
And then my last question is concerning the tribe. It is a sovereign nation. Do we get their permission? Are they aware of all the surveying that we're doing of them? How does that work?
We don't generally get their permission to do an overflight. I don't believe that, nor does Google or any of the satellite imagery companies when they're flying over. The tribe often wants to purchase the data after the fact, and they end up purchasing it at a much lower rate than if they had flown it
So they're
themselves.
aware of the surveillance
Yeah.
or mapping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Public comment?
No, Mayor.
Entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2020-153 with GeoFix Limited for aerial imagery and digital terrain mapping in the amount of $109,759 plus any applicable taxes.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Please vote.
Passes 7-0.
All right. Well, thanks for a great day, council. We're going to end it with Ronald Reagan and a quote from the former president. Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. This meeting is adjourned.